This weekend will not be complete without talking about how Manchester City defeated Arsenal in the Carabao Cup. We have a lot to talk about, but we're going to just try to make it quick. And we're going to talk about how Manchester City made light work of Arsenal, of Toothless Arsenal in the Carabao Cup final. And, we just have to talk about it because the truth is, Arsenal were on the brink of winning their first trophy in 5 years. They got to their second final in 6 years. And it was like, you know what? We need to do something about it. We need to get to the final and win it. The last time they won something was in the 2019-20 season when Arteta took over an Unai Emery side in December, and then they won the I think they won the FA Cup that year. So now, like I said, with the first major silverware of the season up for grabs, Arsenal and Manchester City prepared for the Wembley battle for the right to be crowned the 2026 Carabao Cup winners. Now, two of the best teams in the Premier League. They're number one and number two, right? And they both this season have played extremely effective football at their best. So the pre-game thoughts that it would be an epic final weren't without basic foundation, right? Now, Arteta obviously before coming into this game had never lost at Wembley. He's played 8 games, he's won 3 and drawn 5, both as a player and as a manager, right? While Pep Guardiola had won all his previous Carabao Cup finals, as the City side contested, including the 2018 final against Arsenal, and Arteta was the assistant manager. Then, when Arteta was part of the backroom staff, as I said. Now the Gunners came into this match with in a sensational run of form, having not lost in 14 matches in all competition after beating Newcastle in the semi-final. Now, City also had been winless in their last 3 games leading to Sunday's game on the other hand. Now, obviously, when you look at like historical context of the last 5 games, or the last 4 leading into the Carabao Cup final, there has been a 1-1 draw between Arsenal and Manchester City in the Premier League, and also in the Premier League, Arsenal beat Man City 5-1, and in the Premier League again last season, it's been a 2-2 draw, and then also the game before it was basically a 0-0 draw. So, like, Arsenal had all the stats stacking up against them, and coming into this game, they started with their second goalkeeper in Arrizabalaga, right? And so it was super interesting. They started with Arrizabalaga in net, with Ben White and Hincapi left and right back, and then Saliba and Gabriel Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes in the center backs, right and left. Then you had your Zubimendi and your Declan Rice in the two holding in the 4-2-3-1, and then Saka on the right, Havertz in the middle, and then Trossard on the left with Gyokeres in the attack. Now, it was supposed to be a game where basically Arsenal were just going to come and show their strongest team and try to build momentum and everything in between. While Manchester City started with James Trafford in net, Netanyahu and Abdulkadir Kusanov in the back two, and then Nico O'Reilly on the left, while Matheus Nunes on the right. And then in the mid, they had Rodri and Silva in the holding pivots, in double pivots. And then you had Cherki in the 10, Doku on the left, and Semenyo on the right, as well as Haaland up top. So it was an interesting matchup for both teams who are just kind of mirroring each other, right? And now, like I said, in terms of head-to-head record, Arsenal has got the better of City of late, like being unbeaten in their last 6 meetings, including the 1-1 draw earlier in the season, when Gabriel Martinelli's 92nd minute, 93rd minute equalizer cancelled out Erling Haaland's opener. So indeed, City hadn't beaten Arsenal since April 2023, and that was an effective start. With both sides having scored in all of their Carabao Cup matches in 25-26 campaign, goals were guaranteed, and it was Arsenal who were out of the blocks the quickest, having 3 on target and 3 shots on target in the space of a few seconds during the opening exchanges. Now, this seems to look like it was Gyokeres' worst game in a while, right? Two of the quick shots came in quick succession from Bukayo Saka, the one Arsenal player who has generally been looked to for a spark of creativity, and he's been kind of off of late, right? And basically starting from the bench for the most part in some games, especially for big moments in the season. Despite seeming to be somewhat under the cosh thanks to a flurry of Arsenal chances, City were already controlling the game with 69% ball possession collectively during the opening half an hour. Now, obviously, Bernardo Silva's 90.9% pass accuracy or pass completion saw him dominate the Gunners midfield, whilst Viktor Gyokeres was getting no change whatsoever from Netanyahu with a 90.3 and Abdulkadir Kosanov with a 90.2 defensive contribution as well as pass completion between both of them. Now, it's another kind of hugely disappointing showing from the Swedish international, Viktor Gyokeres, expensive striker that was bought to kind of take this Arsenal side to the next level. Now, the game basically finished with expected goals of 0.64 for Arsenal and 1.51 for Manchester City. And then ball possession ended 62% for Man City, 38% for Arsenal. And then shots on target, shots on goal, Man City had only 2 shots on goal, and those 2 shots were the goals, while Arsenal had 4. Then goal attempts, 10 for both teams. Corners, 3 for 2 corner kicks were 3 for each team, for both teams, right? So there's so many things that we could actually talk about, right? Now, just to talk about how disappointing Gyokeres was, he only had 2 touches in City's box all game. 2 touches. With no shots whatsoever in the 94 minutes of play that he played, he had no shots. 3 accurate crosses made for a 42% completion rate, which was the worst of any player on the day. And even second half substitutes Riccardo Calafiori and Noni Madueke had more total touches than Gyokeres, who had 17. The striker couldn't even redeem himself with a physical output, winning just 2 of his 11 one-on-one duels and none of his aerial duels. That is disappointing. So if we're going to be looking at players who didn't turn up, Gyokeres didn't turn up on the day when it was expected of him to do so. Now, City were flying out of the blocks after the break. It seems Pep Guardiola had sized Arsenal on how they were going to line up or how they were going to play, and he said, you know what, we have to catch them on the break, right? City didn't even have an attempt on goal until the 43rd minute. Like it seemed like Arsenal had control, but then City didn't have a shot on goal until the 43rd minute when Jeremy Doku's effort was blocked, and Haaland just a minute later was off target. So Saka and other players, Saka especially, had 4 tackles in the opening 45 minutes, while Declan Rice contested 3 more like 7 tackles, right? The signs were already there in terms of City's attacking momentum even though it hadn't borne fruit by the time Peter Banks blew the halftime whistle, Peter Banks being the referee of the day. Now, it was super interesting to see that the moment that City get the chance to score, they scored. The beginning of the second half was the polar opposite of the first, with Guardiola's 11 coming on strong and leading at into the hour mark. Now, Arsenal had the opportunity, but they sat back. They sat back a lot. And it's disappointing to see. They sat back a lot. It's expected that they were going to come out the blocks, seeing as they were mirroring Pep Guardiola's formation or Pep Guardiola's style of play. You could see how they played, and when Arsenal had one player tucking into the mid, Pep Guardiola also had one player tucking into the mid. So yeah, it was super interesting. Now, obviously, City took the lead coming into the hour mark, I think 61st minute. And then all of Haaland, Ake, Rayan Cherki, Rodri, and Antoine Semenyo fired off shots, whilst the team collectively upped their possession stats to an incredible 79% at some point in the half. O'Reilly double kind of ended Arsenal's hopes of any chance of winning the Carabao Cup. It was only going to be a matter of time before the citizens opened the scoring, and when Kepa Arrizabalaga mishandled a simple ball into the box from Rayan Cherki to Nico O'Reilly, who was there to seize upon the gift that was presented to him. You look at who was marking him. It was I think Zubimendi, and Zubimendi had no chance because he was caught blindsided. The youngster repeated the trick again just 4 minutes later when City's only two efforts on target in the match took the game away from the Gunners, right? And they had been left shell-shocked by City's intensity after the break. They couldn't even get into second gear. Now, if we're going to talk about other things that panned out in the game, so after Arteta's penchant for keeping things tight and not fighting fire with fire, arguably did this side no favors whatsoever. And with Rice, Saka, and Martin Zubimendi losing possession 39 times between them, the North Londoners weren't able to build up ahead of steam at any point, right? Now, to give some perspective on just how poor Arsenal were, especially in attack after going behind in the following 15 minutes, the ball was in play in the City's defensive third for just 8.1% of the time. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing and absolutely disappointing for Arsenal. The Gunners deserved nothing, basically. They didn't come to the party. They didn't come to play. It seemed like they didn't even want to show for themselves like whether they were worth, winning that trophy. Calafiori at least had one effort on target and another that hit the outside of the post, though that's a damning indictment on the North Londoners front nine on the day. It's a lot of words. Gabriel Jesus, late introduction almost paid dividends, but he too could only find the woodwork with a header as time ran out. In truth, Arsenal deserved nothing from the game as City controlled every aspect every aspect with ease and never looked like giving up the lead once they had their noses in front. It felt like City kind of stifled Arsenal and stopped them from getting what they needed to get. Now, if Arteta was looking for reasons why his side would lose or were off the pace, he can perhaps point it to the lack of service to Viktor Gyokeres. Fed just 8 times all game as a major reason, right? A distinct lack of creativity also hampered the team that has just steamrolled many opponents this season. Just 9 dribbles attempted with a 33% success rate tells its own story. With some games in the Premier League and Champions League still to come for Arsenal, including a trip to the Etihad Stadium, the Gunners need to quickly put this performance out of their minds, right? And if they allow it to affect their confidence, then City are perfectly capable of reeling them in and causing them further disappointments this season. Because the truth, if a City wins, that will reduce the points tally in the league. The question will now be: is this defeat going to affect Arsenal's chances of winning the league? That's for you all to answer. that is for you all to answer if it's going to affect Arsenal's chances of winning the league. You guys can just think about it and just basically analyze it. But there's so many things that we need to look at. First and foremost, the starting lineup. Arteta could have used his strongest, albeit it seemed that Eberechi Eze was injured. But Arteta could have also used his strongest 11 to kind of like determine, basically, to kind of try to win this game. But he came with a very reserved starting 11, a very reserved one, right? We're going to talk about like a few things as to why Manchester City 16, let's not go 16, maybe five conclusions on Manchester City beating bottling Arsenal in the Carabao Cup. The first one we have is that there's no game in English football calendar which carries more disproportionate narrative weight than the Carabao Cup Final. Obviously, like if you win the Carabao Cup Final, it kind of determines your season, like heading to the end. So it's important. Its importance and irrelevance seamlessly fluctuates depending on the winner and the loser. The delineation of its majorness is, and it's an ongoing process between seasons. Basically, like the narrative tends to change. Basically, when you look at it, Arsenal fans now say, "Oh, this cup is not a big cup; it's such a small cup," and all of that. And the truth. Now, the second point is that things are a little more straightforward with Manchester City. Their overhaul of a 9-point gap to Arsenal in the Premier League, and this was the moment they started to believe, right? If they fail to do so, and this excellent display would have, basically meant that they would have lost silverware. So, the third point, which is the third and final, is that it definitely felt like there was something momentous in Arsenal losing this game in that manner. A complete no-show in a cup final only feeds into the idea that this is an evidently brilliant team, phenomenal manager, an exceptional group, which nevertheless cannot quite get over the line, and that's a fact. This is another game. Immediately that first goal went in, you could see the Arsenal players' heads drop. And it felt like, you know what, here we go again. And Arteta's changes were disappointing. I felt he shouldn't have started Trossard. He should have probably started Martinelli, run City off the pace, double team on Semenyo, who was a one-man shark on that right side. And then on the other side, Ben White and Saka were doing a job, like coming back. Saka was coming back particularly, and then you had your defense all on lock. And then obviously when you come to, they even subbed off Saka, brought on Madueke, and Madueke was still doing a good job. Calafiori coming on did better than Hincapi as well. Calafiori could have started the game as well. I don't know what Arteta was thinking. Eberechi is injured. Why don't you bring your whole starting lineup? I felt like Arteta could have started with, Raya. It's just the cup final, right? Because this guy has a very bad record. Kepa Arrizabalaga has a very bad record in Wembley. So you'd have started with Raya. When you start with Raya, then your back two is the two Gabriels, Saliba and Megalish. And then in your left back should have been Calafiori. Ben White obviously just come back from injury. Jurgen Timber is injured, so Ben White holds right back. Then you have your mid, instead of going with Zubimendi, seeing as Eze is injured, instead of going with Zubimendi alone, you'd have gone with your Norgard, right? You start with Norgard and Zubimendi in your 2-6s, put Declan Rice as your attacking mid. Then you can start with Saka, put Martinelli on the left, and then obviously put your Gyokeres up top. Declan Rice can be your box-to-box mid. That's a very strong midfielder. Norgard and Zubimendi do the dirty work. Norgard defensively, Zubimendi does your ball playing, and then your Declan Rice does your box-to-box. He plays as an 8 and in 10 as well, and then he helps the D when it's needed and attack when it's needed. But Declan Rice was also coasting, having a bad game. And then you switch, Saka to an extent. After you've had your field day with Declan Rice, you sub off Norgard, drop your Declan Rice back in the 6. Then you switch Saka to the 10, bring on Madueke, and then take off Martinelli after he's run his socks off, bring on Trossard. Then you're done with that. You take off Saka, bring on Havertz, or you take off Gyokeres, bring on Havertz, and then you have a team that's able to compete. Gyokeres was poor. Havertz can drop deep and win the ball and create chances for the others. But no, if Arsenal fans and rival fans can see these things, how much more Arteta? But he likes to tinker with his team, and he does the same thing that Pep does. But then Pep outclassed him on the day. But it is what it is. We could go on and on and on and on and talk about this, but what do I know? We have to just keep building. But it is what it is. I just thought to bring you this review and just to analyze this and to let you know that, Arsenal were this close to winning a trophy and they've lost it. And hopefully it doesn't affect them when they face teams in the Premier League and in the Champions League. So they are fighting on three fronts now. Quadruple is gone. Quadruple is destroyed by City. They are fighting on three fronts now. You have your a Premier League, and if 9 points is a long haul, but they face City, right? They face City. Let's see. We'll see their fixtures, right? Arsenal will face City. Just looking at their fixtures right here. Arsenal will face City along the way. Their next game is basically against Southampton in the FA Cup, which is then they go to Sporting in the Champions League. Then they come back to Bournemouth, who are in an 11-game unbeaten run. Then they go back to Sporting again in the Champions League return leg, and then they face City in April on the 19th. So basically, it's going to be back-to-back games for them. With injured Eze, I don't know. So they face a tough City, a tough Newcastle, and a tough Fulham. So 9 points. There could be a 9-point swing in this game, in these last three games, between not the last three, but 19th April, 25th April, and 2nd of May. Then they have West Ham, which they could beat. Burnley, they could beat. Crystal Palace could be a struggle. But then where the issue is facing City away at the Etihad, facing Newcastle at home at the Emirates, and then they go to Fulham and play in the London Derby. Fulham are also fighting for their lives. Then when they face West Ham, Burnley, and Crystal Palace, maybe Crystal Palace will be the tough one. So, like I said, there's 9 points up for grabs, right? If Bournemouth give them trouble, then it could be maybe Bournemouth sneak a point or sneak two or beat them or something. Then we now talk about the title charge for Man City again, and we don't want that. Even though I would rather that, in as much as they've worked hard for it, hopefully they're able to get the title. But it is what it is. Arsenal fans are so noisy, and the truth is, it would have even been better for City to win the league. But then, because I have some Arsenal friends, I just really want them to at least rejoice for something. Hopefully they don't make me feel bad after hoping that they win the league. But it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section. If you haven't already, please do like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't have to miss anything as it relates to all things football. I'll see you on the next one. We're trying to grow our community, so just give us a like and press that subscribe button so we can keep growing together. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye and God bless.